The conference went really well and the people were very engaged. If you think of what happened, in a way, we didn't expect this many registrations, and at the end we got 200, so we had to move from Cedefop to another venue that made things a little bit more complicated for us, but really made it much more interesting to have all these inputs. So I think it went really well and people seem very happy about it.
One of the main presentations was yours, because you presented the update to the validation inventory, the 2016 update, in fact. Can you just briefly tell us what the main points of this update are?
In terms of the outcomes, I think it's what came out of the discussion also a little bit, that we are at a point where there is the policies are there in terms of if you want paper, but now we really need to go into the how and the implementation. And I think that our guidelines, the guidelines that we developed with the Commission and to some extent the inventory are showing in a way that how. So we really have to keep working on the how. How do we implement this? How do we make it a reality for everybody and for all citizens in Europe? No? That it doesn't become just a policy term, but really an action.
Seeing how participants were engaged and reacted to what was presented to them, what do you think their main concerns and points for action are?
One of the main issues is the awareness raising. So, as I say, there are to some extent some in place possibilities for going through validation, but people are not aware of it. So we really need to raise awareness to make sure that people engage again in the process of validation. So this is for the citizens in a way. At the policy level, there is a need for making sure that there are resources there, that the resources are there, because what we are seeing also is that this is still missing in a way. There are some resources, there are some to some extent in some countries, but we need some more push for these resources. And the third point is really the coordination across all the stakeholders. There is a lot of activity going around, employers to some extent, sectoral, there are also voluntary sector doing a lot of work. A lot of the educational sector is doing a lot of work, but we need to coordinate all these to have a mechanism that is able to cut across all these different stakeholders and that they all come together to create one system that is flexible to adapt to the others, but that we really need this coordination.
And what's next for Cedefop with regard to validation?
Well, now we will publish the inventory, the update of the inventory. We will, of course, have to go through all the information we have got from the conference and get it all together and put it on the web for everybody to share. We will start now the process for the next update, actually, because it usually takes around 2 years. And also, I think we will try to go very much into the issue of guidance and counseling together with validation, because these are two things that also came out in the conference pretty clear. The counseling and the guidance is pretty important aspect. That's one, and the other thing is we will try to focus also on assessment of learning outcomes. So, as you know, we are doing a lot of work on learning outcomes, and I think we have to try now to go into the assessment part of the validation process.
And because you mentioned guidance, there was a lot of discussion about guidance and about the fact that in many countries there are validation arrangements in place, but people don't know about them.
There are some countries where it is happening to some extent, and still there is not enough awareness, but there are in some countries where nothing is happening in a way. So we also need to take that into account, or to think of that as it's not that they are in place and now we don't have anything to do in a way. The policies, if you want, or the legal systems in some countries are there, in some others we really have to work on it. But in general, let's say we need to go into this how to do it in a way, and counseling, and especially to bring it to the people, no? And this is, I think, what the point of having these 4 parallel sessions where we go into each of the individuals is really how do we bring it to the people, how do we make sure, and this needs to be done at the local level. So you need, again, the coordination of the local and the policy level.
And last but not least, what about migrants and refugees, which is also a hot topic and again was discussed a lot during the conference?
You could see it very clearly in the last session that people were really putting a lot of questions there on migration and refugees. Of course, it's a hot topic. And I think that validation can play a role in their integration. It's not the only solution, and I think this is also important. I think sometimes we that work in validation sometimes say, validation can solve everything. It's not the case. It really has to work with other policies. Again, the coherence across the different policies is crucial. And in the case of migration, I think it's also this aspect is one important, very important factor, the validation. And it needs to be integrated into public employment services, into integration policies, into labor market intelligence issues. So it really needs to be one of the aspects on the migration process. And now the work that we are doing in Cedefop, in fact, is really trying to look at this whole process from the beginning, when you leave your country to when you get assigned to another different country. That all that process work together as a unit and validation is an important part of it, for sure.